Welcome to Yell, Fight, Sooie, college football from three friendly-ish rivals.
So, hey, everybody, welcome to the pre-week before Halloween edition of Yell, Fight, Sooie. That's why FS for everybody that's there. My name is Scott McIntyre, but we have represented with us Mr. Yell.
I'm Andy.
Andy Tom Chesson, Mr. Fight.
James Christopher. Nice to be back, guys.
The one and only himself, and Mr. Sooie, Scott McIntyre. Now, I'm not going to get into a bunch about Arkansas, guys. Whenever we're kicking this off, I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to talk more about this. Arkansas righted the ship at BYU last week. Now we beat off this week. I mean, we have an off week, and
made it 30 seconds, Scott.
The only thing that
Arkansas like that only happens 1 week a year
is getting healthy on this week of bye, and that's what we have going. But Jim, let's start off with you. Hey, man, Texas had a game last week that I'm wondering how your fingernails are doing.
I'll be honest. I'm still very much in evaluation mode, so I'm going to take the positive of the offense looked completely disjointed for about the first quarter, and I think did a pretty good job to rally. And I think that they faced some adversity and they came back from the adversity. They didn't crumble. I do think that the Iowa State head coach has a point on was it targeting on the fumble or wasn't it? But that doesn't really matter because it was called a fumble and Texas with a big defensive stop. So overall, I mean, I feel like it's, again, everything's progress, everything's moving in the right direction. And I feel pretty good about the nature of that win.
You guys look like a new team when your quarterback is clicking. Quentin Ewers looks, or however you pronounce his last name, he looks like the real deal, man. Yeah, I mean, what you feeling?
He has a big boy arm. He can make all the throws. He's escapable. They're running this new play that I've never seen before, and it's almost like a tight end screen kind of deal where one tight end comes across the formation, the other tight end on the other end is set up the screen, and it just I don't know. It feels just like a different team altogether.
So the last question, let me ask you on this also, because of watching what Texas has done up to this point. Eventually Texas is coming over to the SEC, and you've already played Alabama really, really close this year, better than all but one team has played them. Do you see like changes happening within your program that you think will carry over? That is the prep work for the SEC move that you see within the way the team's playing? Or are we just playing football and we'll figure it out?
No, I don't think that at all. I think that the change from Tom Herman to Steve Sarkisian, I think, had everything to do with the SEC. I think he coached in the SEC. He knows the conference. I think that they are recruiting to play in the SEC. I mean, the Big 12 is all about being fast, right? Well, they're recruiting big linemen. They're recruiting what he calls big bodies. I don't expect that we're going to come in and I imagine we'll be a middle of the pack SEC team when we first get in there, but I do feel like there's an enthusiasm with the recruiting, and I feel like they are definitely keeping an eye on what that experience is going to be like when it happens, which now, of course, it won't happen until the 25 football season. But I think it's definitely on their mind to be ready to at least compete.
Okay. And I want to come back to the 2025 thing as we get later on into the show. But Andy, you guys didn't play last week. You had the week. Your program had the week.
Our prostates are clear. Thank you, Scott.
You guys did a great job. You beat off like nobody last week.
It's a real neat deal.
You really did. You really did. You really, really did. I can do the Backstreet Boys bye thing again, but I think once is enough. So Andy, coming out of the off week, what's the general feel around A&M Nation? You guys you've had Hayes King, then you have Max Johnson. Now you've had adversity. You've had great wins. You've had some losses that make you scratch your head. What's the feeling in College Station?
Nobody knows. Online fan base is in despair. Students are still lining up 90 hours before the Ole Miss ticket draw. So there's a great disparity amongst the fan base. Somehow through the bye week we got worse because Alabama beat the crap out of our offensive line, which had not been a strong suit to begin with, So there's a lot of doom and gloom until we see exactly what product we're putting out on the field Saturday. And if you thought you were going to go another week without a Spencer Rattler reference, it's not this week.
Not this week, baby. We're gonna rattle to our heart's content here in a little bit. Man,
frosted tips.
Yeah, you gotta, I mean, who doesn't love frosted tips? And I'll just leave that there. So if I look at A&M, and I know there's a lot of people that are saying, hey, do you realize that 100 games in, Kevin Sumlin and Jimbo Fisher have the exact same record? I don't think that's fair, because I think that Kevin Sumlin may have Kevin Sumlin, it felt like, came into a better situation personnel-wise, possibly, than what Fisher walked into. But the players pre-Sumlin weren't being coached up as well. But is there talk of that? Is there Sumlin versus
it is certainly a talking point that the more doom and gloom folks in our fan base have brought up, and certainly our recruiting rivals have brought up, because it's year 5 for Jimbo Fisher. The reality
please take note of that, Sam Pittman, as we recruit against them. Please take note of that.
The reality is Sumlin won 20 games in his first 2 seasons with Mike Sherman's offensive line, and then proceeded to not be able to draft or recruit an offensive lineman worth anything for the next 3 seasons. So Fisher had a worse rebuild, I guess. I mean, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of another, because there were some things that I think Sumlin did well from a recruiting standpoint and an infrastructure standpoint.
The helicopter,
but which we do not use anymore. But there's some things that I think Jimbo Fisher rightfully identified upon taking the job, that you guys need to grow up in the way you handle some of these things. And, growing pains aren't always easy. Jimbo Fisher's win total also hasn't been backloaded. The things that we have going for us is that we, Appalachian State aside, play well at home. We beat top 10 teams at home. We do have some things to build on, and we have all the talent in the world. It's just really, really, really young. And that's on Jimbo Fisher, because those sophomore, junior, and senior classes that are sitting there aren't contributing where they needed to contribute. He didn't do a good job of holding on to some of the guys he could have held on to, that instead went to go be undrafted free agents in the NFL. And he did not take advantage or use at all, really, the portal to plug any holes, which we certainly could have used a left tackle. We certainly could have used another linebacker. We certainly could have used another. I mean, there's a number of options there. And while I don't think the portal's the be all end all, if you're going to play big boy football and there's only 5 worthwhile recruits in the portal, you have to go be a player on those 5.
Yeah. Andy, real quick, how many years, though, did Sumlin also get to backload that with Big 12 competition versus SEC, or was there any?
Sumlin never coached in the Big 12.
Big 12 was always SEC. Okay.
He was the first coach, and famously selected Johnny Manziel to start his redshirt freshman year, and they went 11-2 that year.
Okay. I didn't know.
Yeah, and the way they were playing, and I know it's every college program has this revisionist piece. The way they were playing, had we been in the current playoff situation that we are now, they would have been a playoff team, and they would have been really, really hard to beat for anybody. Notre Dame would not have lasted against them, and we had already beaten Alabama once that year. So that would have been that was as close to knocking on the door as we've gotten. I think we finished 5 that year. We finished 4 in 2020, and this year we're probably going to be unranked unless we go 6-0.
Trust me, it's okay to be unranked. We've been there. Jim knows about it too. You survive. You get through it. You'll be okay. Yeah. But let me ask you this also. So the beginning of the year, we're months away from it now, but there was the heated issue between Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban. They're barking back and forth about recruiting. Has all that talk died down now for an A&M from an A&M standpoint, now that the season's going and you've got your own set of hurdles to get through? Or are there still people upset that Fisher Fisher and Saban made a deal out of that? I don't know. I don't know if that's playing out.
I think that I don't want to give the SEC head office a lot of credit for a lot of things, because they very clearly have some teams that they favor over teams that they don't. But I think that
LSU, Florida.
Where is that office located again? Birmingham? Yeah.
Auburn. Georgia.
Weird how close that is to Tuscaloosa. Anyway, I think that the commissioner handled that well. I don't have a lot of love for some of the things he's done and some of the way he's handled his business, but I think he handled that well, told them both to shut up, and they seem to have come to a place. I think Fisher was both right when he blew up and also out of line when he blew up. And, both things can be true at some point. There's probably a different way to handle it other than calling a press conference. Now, was it the most entertaining thing of the summer in college football? 100%. And thanks for the clicks. But as we've
the only
talked
thing
about
that would have
before,
made it better is if Mike Leach could have somehow been involved in that press conference.
100%. Yeah.
Only way it could have been better.
But as we've said before, a lot of that was taken out of context in that Saban was talking to a group of donors who he wanted to have start giving more money, start coming up with NIL deals for guys because we're losing out on recruits. And yeah, he said something about A&M buying their entire class, which everybody knows isn't true. But he was trying to make a point to this select group of donors and forgot that we live in 2022 where everything is recorded and immediately thrown out on the internet after it's over.
Yeah, and in all
I feel
honesty,
bad for you.
accusing a Southwest Conference team of buying their entire class, that's not old news. I mean, we've been doing that since we did that in the 60s and 70s and 80s.
Yes, prior to Arkansas's entry into the SEC, no team in the SEC had ever violated NCAA bylaws because they hold them so sacred.
Yeah, they'll pay player.
Andy, though, I do feel like you're the Sisyphus of sports fans. I mean, you are an Astros fan. We talked on our previous show that's also coming out today about how MLB often makes decisions despite our best interest. And then
Yankees.
right. And then the SEC also. I mean, at least the Big 12 is going to kiss our ass till we leave. I at least have that.
Hey, you may walk out of there with the last Big 12 championship too.
How sweet would that be?
It's kind of like when who was it? Scott Hall and Kevin Nash left WWE and showed up the next night on WCW with the title belts. I could see Texas pulling. Wouldn't that be great? Let's think about that for a minute. Think about Steve Sarkisian walking into the SEC, just doing that full Conor McGregor walk, holding the belt. Wouldn't that be awesome?
It would be sweet.
Oh my God. Is that Quinn Ewers theme music?
God, he's got a chair. Bijan Robinson's coming down the aisle. He's taking out everybody. Oh my God.
I'm 100% here for that. I hope.
All right. So now I will try bring us back. Last thing I want to ask you guys about this last week. What about other games around you? And I mean, there was kind of a big game in Knoxville, from what I understand, where the kicker did his best imitation of Charlie Huff throwing a knuckleball that went through the goalpost.
It just matters if it goes in, as we saw in the A&M Arkansas game.
It's like a Sevy Ballesteros scorecard, man. Nobody asked how; they only ask how many. But what stood out to you guys, either in that Tennessee-Alabama game or in other things that you saw last week? Andy, I started with Jim last time. I'll stick with you and let you kick it off. What thought you got?
I mean, the thing that dominated, we were on a bye week. The thing that dominated my attention was that Alabama-Tennessee game. I am right, wrong, or indifferent married into a Tennessee family. My wife is a Vol grad. My father-in-law is a Vol grad. I've had to listen, not a lot, but especially initially once A&M got into the SEC, about how hard the SEC was going to be, and proceeded to watch Tennessee be one of the worst teams in the SEC for most of that time. They may have overcome that. They also may have a 38-year-old quarterback that they're taking advantage of. Some things have gone well for Tennessee this year that I don't know are sustainable for Josh Heupel. That being said, that was, if you ever want to point to somebody, a game that they need to watch if they've never seen college football before and see the difference between that and an NFL game, that would be a game that you would show them, because that was a game that was high scoring. There were defensive plays. There was high drama for a while, and that crowd went nuts. And I'm sure whatever bank picked up the deal for that $100,000 fine for rushing the field, which, by the way, nobody got punched or kicked or shoved in the back, Texas Tech. Everybody was just out there partying. That was just an incredible atmosphere. And frankly, everybody roots against Alabama the way everybody roots against the Yankees. So it didn't hurt my feelings to see Tennessee win.
But who tears down their goalpost just to throw them in the lake or the river?
Tech.
I don't. What?
Texas Tech.
Well, yeah, if they had water, they'd throw it in there, but they just don't
I
have
mean-
any water out there.
Well, I feel bad for the guy. We were watching that last field goal, and I replayed it. There was a guy who immediately after the field goal went in, his job was to turn the pad around so he could start the process of collapsing that thing, and he got rushed before he could do it. So he probably got fired from his job.
But in all honesty, I mean, I want to give the benefit of the doubt to Tennessee fans, because when you've been lost in the freaking wilderness for 20 years, you have time to plan your rush
Sure.
on that guy when you finally win a big game. And I'm just going to say this: there are no more insufferable fans on the internet right now than Tennessee fans. And I just want to remind everyone at home of how long they've been bad. These guys, their parents passed away and told them, when we win again, make sure you say this. I mean, that's how bad it is in Tennessee. So we should cut our Tennessee brethren a break and give them this one.
No matter what happens this year, they will always have the Fulmer Cup, and they will always lead in the Fulmer Cup.
Hey, real quick, I have breaking baseball news. That's not going to make Andy happy. News just broke that Joe Espada will be the new manager for the Chicago White Sox.
All right. We'll take Jose Abreu in exchange.
That might happen. Sorry. Anyway, back to football. But
Tony La Russa said he'll drink to that. So Jim, still don't like him. I don't care. Still
I don't
like
either. Yeah.
What about you? Was it this game? Was it a different game?
No, TCU, Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State began the game how I thought the game would go, which was really running out way ahead, and TCU fighting back the way they did. Of course, no defense was played in the game. I think there were 83 total points scored, something like that, which is very Big 12. But yeah, I think that surprised me the most. The way it began, I think OSU went up 14 on them, like to start, and to me it felt like the game was over. And then to watch TCU claw back, it made me think a lot higher of the Horned Frogs. I kind of thought they were a little overhyped, but apparently I was incorrect.
Yeah, I mean, they're like we talked about last week. Their quarterback really does impress me, Duggan, and just how he drives that team. But also to have had Gary Patterson in that coaching spot for so long, now he's gone, and you're trying to instill something different. I mean, this is what, year 3, year 4? I guess it's the time for that. But I'm with you. TCU really, they impressed me last week, and they showed me they're for real.
Well, Max Duggan, despite sounding like he should be in a movie with the Little People produced by Disney, Max Duggan and the Little People. They're looking for a pot of gold. He is that
he
team.
one of Jim Bob's 20 kids from up in Northwest Arkansas?
Very, very possibly. Or related to Hacksaw. I don't know, since we're talking about wrestling earlier.
Oh, tough guy. I'm sorry. Okay.
Former defensive end for the Atlanta Falcons and SMU. Anyway, TCU's the whole Big 12 is actually really interesting to me, because it's hard to gauge just how good the rest of the teams that Texas, for instance, has to play the rest of the season. Oklahoma, to me, clearly is the worst team in that league right now, the way they're playing. I think they have the second most talent in that league, but they're just not playing well, even though they, I think, won last week.
They knocked off Kansas last week. I mean, they
did, but I think Kansas
righted the ship in some ways.
Did you? I mean, nationally, it was a good story for Kansas. You had game day there. All the good things were happening for Kansas. They lost their starting quarterback. You could kind of see that happen.
And you're still Kansas. And it's not.
I mean, it's the biggest thing to happen since Dorothy got caught up in the tornado. To have game day, it's a pretty big deal. But make the argument that Kansas has worked in Oklahoma. You still have 8 other teams who are all better than those 2. And Texas has to still face TCU and Baylor, and I mean, in Kansas, it's a much more competitive league than I think a lot of people were giving them credit for. So if Texas is to finish at the top of that or end up in the championship game, which they still have the opportunity to do, that's a huge step for Sarkisian, especially since he's going to have to now talk about, and then we're going to get to it, 2 more years, 2 more seasons before SEC play, guys. I know we said next year, and then we said 24, but really 25.
Well, since it's come up twice, let's talk about it. They're not the move for Texas and Oklahoma. I don't think 2 months ago, if anyone put a gun to any of our heads and said, will this really not happen until 2025? I think we all would have chuckled at that, but now it's not going to happen until 2025. What are our thoughts on this, gentlemen?
Well, I want to start by asking Andy a question because ironically enough, he has more inside knowledge on the University of Texas boosters and program than I do. Andy, is the SEC thing a dumb deal, or is this some type of maybe
Did you say done deal or dumb deal?
Done. Or is this some kind of posturing to see if the Big 12 actually gets better? I honestly, I'm not asking because I have an idea of what I want one way or the other. I simply don't know.
My read on it, I guess we should say, for those of you that don't know, the Big 12 formally announced that Texas and OU had committed to staying in the Big 12 until the end of the 25 sports season, which is spring sports. They'll start.
My ex-wife made a commitment too, just so you guys know. Sorry.
So did mine.
I think, to answer your question directly, Jim, from what I understand, Kevin Etefei, the little guy that stood next to Sarkisian in his introductory, he's your head alumni fundraiser booster guy. He's the guy who got Sarkisian from Alabama, if you want to believe that narrative. He's also the guy who was pulling a lot of the strings financially behind the scenes to get the SEC move to be a possibility. He wants it. He's got a lot of guys on his side. There was some contention, I think, amongst your ranks at some point about we should hold out for a Big Ten offer, or do we really want to associate with those SEC teams and all of that stuff going on. From what I understand, a lot of that has died down. The reason that this is extended now to 2025, which was the original official date, is that Oklahoma just simply couldn't afford to come up with the money for the buyout. It would cost both schools $80 to $90 million, depending on which set of math you want to look at.
They really are a poverty franchise.
Texas, and there was some talk that Texas was going to pay it for them. But can you imagine Oklahoma owing the University of Texas $80 million? We're going to give you really simple interest terms.
After their performance, after their performance at the state fair and how Texas beat the hell out of them, if somebody told me that Texas paid Oklahoma $80 million to get into the SEC, and as part of that they got to let Texas beat the shit out, then suddenly that game makes a lot more sense to me, because how they scored no points whatsoever.
I think they should have beat him and then dropped an $80 million check and said, "Google us, bitch," and then walked off.
Well, I mean, the whole thing really talks to the strength of the remaining Big 12 schools, because the original thought process was that if we, Texas and Oklahoma, say, look, we're leaving at some point, 2025, whenever, you guys should go find new homes. The thought was that all of these individual schools, or enough of them, would go find new conferences to be in, and that would relieve both Texas and Oklahoma of their grant of rights, because the conference would no longer exist. Instead, those remaining 8 schools doubled down, recruited 4 more schools to replace the 2 of you to get back to the 12, but it'll be 14 for 2 more. There's a lot of math going on at that conference that's probably unnecessary. And so it's a viable business operation. And so there was no elimination of the grant of rights. And while Texas could have afforded to pay it, perhaps, maybe they didn't want to, but they could have afforded it, Oklahoma in no way, shape, or form could afford to just give $80 million to the Big 12 so they could get in the SEC a couple of years early.
So let me
sum up. You guys are joined at the hip at least for 2 more years.
But it's
let me just sum up. Yep. We're not in the Big 10 because OU's too dumb, and we're not in the SEC because OU's too po. Moving on.
That's a fair assessment.
And they're not in the Pac-12 because Oklahoma does not have a Pacific Coast border, nor do they have an Atlantic Coast border, so they can't be ACC. So you're stuck where you're stuck for the time being. Hopefully they can raise money. Maybe somebody can start a GoFundMe or something like that to make sure that 2025, it can really be a reality for the Sooners, bless their hearts. Yeah, Jim, what are your thoughts on not moving till 2025? Just more time to dominate the Big 12, hopefully, before you make the move?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think to your point, yeah, like if you can continue to build up, first of all, you can sell potential to recruits of the SEC for 2 more years as opposed to selling reality of the SEC. And if you come back in, now you've got 2 recruiting cycles. Quinn Ewers probably won't even be here if it all goes to plan. He'll be drafted and Arch Manning will be the quarterback.
I mean, you have Manning, you're going to be an SEC school.
Yeah, true. So to me, I think there are definitely positives out of it. Most importantly, knowing that OU is poor.
That's the takeaway.
And
OU is poor.
We've got the important things identified. So okay, let me roll in. I do want to one last thing I want to ask you guys. Does it feel like we're living in bizarro world this year? Like this season's just kind of, because I'm looking at Syracuse is undefeated, Illinois is leading the Big Ten West, UCLA is 6-0, Tennessee is undefeated. Is it just me, or does this feel really weird this year?
Well, I mean, I think for a school like Tennessee, this is going to happen once every 10, 15 years where they just have a good season. That's just, I mean, they're going to look into it. The SEC East isn't as strong as the West. They have to beat Georgia, basically. The fact that they beat Alabama is great. But again, they have a really old quarterback who has a lot of experience. He's legitimately 25, and he didn't go play baseball for a couple of years and then come back to college football like Chris Winkie. This is a guy who has been since 18 in college football. He is somehow in his 7th season of college football. Good for Tennessee. I think the bigger story are schools that have been moribund even long. Illinois is a fantastic story, and I know Bert isn't your favorite guy.
Oh, I like Bert. Don't get me wrong. I like Bert. I would drink Tito's with him, but I couldn't keep up with him. But I love Bert.
But I think he's gone back to a place where his strength is what he's able to exploit: offensive line play and running the ball, which the SEC was turning into a league where that's not how you win necessarily anymore. He's gone to a place in Illinois that is hungry for wins. Illinois is a great story to me. And, you know, if it's the Bert Bielema redemption arc, fantastic for him. Got nothing against him, especially since he beat Texas. What was it? Held them at 58 yards in Charlie Strong's first year. We call that a strong offense.
Yeah, I was there. I loved it. He called it borderline erotic, but that's different. I do want to say, I think one of the reasons that Illinois is having success this year also is the offensive coordinator, Barry Lunny Jr.
I'm not really frozen.
Back at Arkansas, former tight ends coach at Arkansas, but he was the Texas San Antonio offensive coordinator the last couple of years. And I think we saw UTSA take giant strides forward. And I think he carried that over to Illinois. He already knew Bielema because he had previously been on staff. So it seems like that's a marriage that's gone really well there. But Jim, what are your thoughts? Is it bizarre? Are we?
I think it's fun. I'm not going to use the word bizarre. I think it's what, like, I think parity is good in a sport like college football. I think, one of the things that I worry about as we kind of move towards the thing we both agree is that traditions and other programs that maybe aren't going to be able to keep up with what these super conferences become aren't going to feel as important. They're not going to feel as, worthwhile. And one of the things I love about college football is no matter what size school or how rich your tradition, there's something there that connects you back to where you graduated from. So I'm here for it. I particularly like seeing Illinois do what they're doing. UCLA, to me, it's like, what took you so long? You can't get to LA. But no, I think for me, I think it's just good for the sport.
And I will add to that the expansion to 12 teams in the playoffs is just going to increase parity, because you don't have to say, I have to go to Alabama if I want to be a playoff team. You can't go spend your career at Illinois or UCLA and have just as good a shot at getting in that field. And I think what we're going to see over time is that, a lot like every other playoff system in the world, Yankees fans, Dodgers fans, the playoffs are a crapshoot once you get there. And so you're going to see upsets. You're going to see, maybe not on the scale of the NCAA basketball tournament, but you're going to see more teams have an opportunity to win championships, which is just good for the sport. Because right now, with no change to the playoff, you run a very real risk of it being college football turning into a regional sport, and that region being the Southeast and the Midwest.
Yeah, I think with the transfer
outlier out in LA.
Yeah, I think you guys are right. The pair with the increased number of teams in the playoffs, the transfer portal there, even though there's probably going to be some more rules around that coming up, but I think that just increases other teams' opportunity to get seen. And let's be honest, to turn into a blue blood is tough. But if you can make it into the playoffs 2 or 3 years in a row, blood's looking pretty blue.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, oh, by the way, what's the number one question asked by Dodgers players over the course of the last week? Yeah, do you have a tea time available around 9:00? So now, so okay, I want to do something really fun before we talk about the upcoming week. We're halfway through. All of us are halfway or past halfway point if we want to count our bowl games and all that fun stuff. If you could liken your team to something right now, what would that be? And I'll start because I liken the rate. I was thinking about what kind of animal would these different teams be, and I've got an idea of what I think about both of you guys. But I think Arkansas is like any really terribly injured animal that's just making a lot of trips to the vet right now. That's what it feels like because we've been so beaten up. I feel like we're about a C grade through the year, but I just feel like we've been through wild animal battles on Discovery Channel or something coming out of that. But for you guys, what, Andy? I see Jim's wheels turning. I'm going to give his wheels a second to keep turning. Andy, I see you grinning. So you get the first question. What would you like an A&M?
Not a grin because it's funny. It's the A&M program closely aligns to Ishtar right now. Whole lot of money, whole lot of talent, no fucking results.
Waterworld.
I mean, Waterworld's probably a more recent example, but I think Waterworld did better. In 1987, Ishtar only booked $100,000 more than a movie called The Gate, which probably of the people on this channel, only Jim has watched because he watches obscure horror movies.
I'm just done.
That wraps us up on Yelp. I mean, really.
Thanks for
But
joining
seriously,
us.
you've got a group of talent that averages top 5 in college football. You've got the second highest paid coach in college football. Last time I checked, it might be off by a person or two.
We're talking about Jimbo.
You've got
Jimbo
Fisher.
Clute.
Yes,
Fisher.
Clute. You've got all the infrastructure in the world. You have the Texas recruiting base. You have all the facilities, and you're sitting at 3-3 with a loss to Appalachian State on your home turf, and then a massacre from Mississippi State. And my only redeeming thing this year so far is that Mississippi State might be okay. They might be an okay team.
Yeah, I think they'll win this weekend. Actually, I think they'll beat Bama.
And that's Bama's got. I said it 3 weeks ago. I thought Arkansas had a good shot at them, and just things didn't fall your way. A&M had a good shot at them, and then finally Tennessee took them down. And I think you could argue that Alabama's gettable, and I don't think they're necessarily worthy of the rank they have. But who are you going to put in front of them? But I think we've talked a lot about Father Time catching up to everybody. At some point, Saban isn't Saban anymore. I'm not saying that's this year. They could still somehow magically make the playoffs with their one loss because they're Alabama, and they're going to get favorable votes from the media and that. Or I'm sorry, not the media, because they don't decide. The committee. Media has nothing to do with it, right?
Right.
Nothing at all, Ishtar.
But that's where I am. It's critical reception is bad. Fan reaction is bad. I don't even want to look at our Rotten Tomatoes score right now because that's also not going to be good.
It's a splat, I'm pretty sure. So Jim, I had no idea he was going to Ishtar, man.
I really wish I'd gone second because now no matter what.
I mean, the bar is. There's nobody watching or listening right now that is like. Here's the great. There's no expectations at this point. Whatever you say, people are going to be like, okay, that's cool. Because
I could have gone Heaven's Gate, slightly more obscure, same result
over here.
So I would say, it's Halloween season. It's almost Christmas season. There's one movie that bridges both. I think the Longhorns are Mogwais right now. I think we're small, we're growing, we're getting some water sprinkled on the program, and now it's starting to multiply. Eventually, we're going to hit Kirby Lane after midnight and turn into a bunch of gremlins and start wrecking shop.
You see, you guys were much more creative about this because I was thinking, Jim, you guys are like a cult that was born 6 months ago. You're figuring out how to run. You're starting to find everybody can see what we think you're going to be. You're a thoroughbred cult that's just trying to find his feet. Meanwhile, I was thinking about A&M's down there like this broken person rocking back and forth in the corner going, we're fine. We're fine.
You
We're
understand,
okay. We're fine.
Scott, last week I asked you to come up with a lyric and you recited an entire song. So we all had to step up our game.
That's true.
I really am the Cliff Clavin of my life. I have chock full of useless knowledge, some of which is actually true. And it's kind of fun just to carry that around. But my Sam and Woody, and one of us has to be Norm also. I don't know who's going to fall into that. But anyway, before we digress into that, let's talk about the upcoming week. So
I'm sorry, did you say what your program reminds you of?
He did.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm good. I
don't feel like we've talked enough Razorback football this week.
Well, there's nothing
Man,
to
I
talk
tell
about
you.
last week.
I have never, ever, ever looked forward to a bye week for my team as much as I do right now. You have 6 defensive backs that are healthy. This just that's an entire dime coverage that's sitting on the bench watching. So, I mean, 4-3 looks great right now when you consider that. And I think a lot of guys have a chance to get healthy. I'm really, really happy for Arkansas to have a bye week. You guys don't have that though. So, Jim, coming to you first, because we're going to bring up a name when we talk about Andy's stuff, and I kind of want to go into that
every week.
A dip more. Jim, what you got heading your way this week, Texas?
This is the week that could break me, because if Texas wins this week, I can now draw a direct path to them getting to the Big 12, and therefore, when we don't, I'll be disappointed. Look, for some reason, OSU is a 6-point dog to the Longhorns. I don't really understand why. I know there might be some issues with Oklahoma State starting quarterback, but that's been very vague information. I think we have a puncher's chance to win the game, and I'm kind of all in. And if it they're setting me up. I've got an abusive relationship with this football team, so we'll see. But I really feel like if they come out of this with a win, and I actually expect them to, then I think it is a different season than what I thought it was in week 1.
Does it make, I mean, the game's at Oklahoma State, but does it make a difference Stillwater in the afternoon versus Stillwater at night?
I definitely think Stillwater at night, you ain't got nothing to do in Oklahoma but drink. So
if you haven't been to Stillwater for a night game, they do drink all day, and they don't have any problem starting at Eskimo Joe's and sliding over from Oklahoma City to get there, drunk all the way. But their stadium is configured in a really unique way in that there is very little room between the sideline and the stands, and the stands are all pitched in a way where it does feel like everybody in that stadium is on top of you when you're on the field and when you're on the sidelines.
Kind of like a family reunion in Oklahoma. I can say that because I have family in Oklahoma.
Sure. But without the penetration, hopefully. Anyway, they have paddles. They're banging on the boards. It's a rowdy atmosphere at Oklahoma State, especially if they get ahead. If they get behind, they quiet down like most home crowds do. But if they feel like they're in the game, they are certainly a factor in that game. Whereas the day game, you don't have as much time to drink, and you got to get there earlier, and nobody lives in Stillwater, so it takes you a minute.
I really feel like, just to give them credit for a moment, I really feel like Oklahoma State is overlooked often. Mike Gundy's been there a long time, and Mike Gundy's won a lot of games, and people, thought about the guy only as the mullet, but I mean, he really does. He really does present a chore, and I think Gundy versus Sarkisian as an offensive chess match, if you will, it excites me as a viewer, as a neutral viewer. That excites me a lot. So, what's the keys for Texas stopping them and winning the game, Jim? What do you think? What do you got to do, or what can you not do?
Well, first of all, Quinn Ewers has to play good. He doesn't have the margin for error that he's going to have that he had against Iowa State. I think that's clear. The other thing is, I think Texas Tech did put a book out on how to beat Texas defensively. And so you're going to have to stay ahead. No, again, that was also Hudson Card, not Quinn Ewers. Right. So it's a different offense. And I think for the defense, it's the same thing. Get after the quarterback, particularly if it's their backup playing. And I think continue to play good defense, and they'll come out with a win.
Awesome. Andy, you're heading to the Palmetto State this weekend.
Before we talk about he who shall not be named, wanted to add that just so everybody's aware, this is the 15th anniversary of the I Am 40 rant by Mike Gundy, because that's the first thing that comes up whenever any mentions, Mike
So if
Gundy.
Texas beats them and he loses it during the post game, he go, "Don't forget, I'm a man. I'm 55."
I hope so. I'm hoping that's what happens, because that's again, entertainment wherever I can get it.
It is crazy to think that he's been there that long, though.
It's
really
crazy to think that was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So all of you feeling old, enjoy.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. Thank you. Now let's talk about your game.
Spencer Rattler experience.
Woo! No, I mean, you got a South Carolina team. They're 4-2. Nobody would have thought that you guys would have a record not as good as South Carolina coming into this game. I mean, nobody would have thought that. God, his name just, why is it Beamer? Shane Beamer. Shane Beamer's done a pretty decent job here in South Carolina, it's looking like, but they also haven't gotten into the heavy meat of their schedule when it gets tough. You guys are their first test. And the second test, but you guys are a big test.
Yeah, I mean, I can sit here and say that South Carolina is not that great a team, because I don't think they're that great a team, but neither are we right now. So it's a kind of a crapshoot. We're going on the road, which we have not proven to be really good at. Although, if you can build off what happened in Tuscaloosa 2 weeks ago, I think that's a great thing. But that's part of Jimbo's challenge, is to get these guys up for every team on their schedule and not just Alabama. And I think that's one of the things that they have struggled with this year. That's the only reason you explain Appalachian State. That's the only way that you don't just out-talent those guys and win based on that. It's you took them lightly, you weren't up, and you tried to get it too late. You saw what a highly motivated A&M team can do against Alabama, where they legitimately should have won that game.
Right.
They didn't. There's
no
moral victories.
The second half against Arkansas, too. Let's give you guys credit there. You came out like gangbusters in the second. Played hard.
But when we make the change to being a championship level program or a contender level program, that's the effort we have to give every week, regardless if it's Sam Houston or Our Ladies of the Poor or the Texas School for the Deaf and Blind. We've got to come out there and just beat. That's a legitimate high school. I played them when I was in high school.
Oh yeah.
Blind. How do you play? I mean, I can understand.
Big drum. It's fantastic. We don't have time to talk about it. Anyway, that's the challenge. Spencer Rattler is not that good a quarterback. They don't have that great a system, but they are playing at home, and everybody in that stadium expects them to win because Shane Beamer has them believing. Part of that is excellent special team play on South Carolina's part. I think they blocked 7 punts so far this year. That's not an accident when you do it 7 times. So we're going to have to be max protect, which affects, how you're going to get your flankers down. I'm using a really old football term. Your gunners down. Flankers
down. Holy crap. Sounds like a Top Gun 3 or something.
Well,
flankers down here.
I hope that we get the return on that.
Incoming rattlers.
That's going to affect things. I think if we have a strength going into this game, it is our defense. Our defense has started playing well, and they've played well for a few weeks in a row. Mississippi State notwithstanding, because a lot of bad things happened in that game. But on the whole, we're starting to see what DJ Durkin can do with the personnel that he has there. My big concern this week, and why this game's a push to me, is our offense, especially along the offensive line, because depending on which rumor you read, and there is no injury report in NCAA football like there is in the NFL, we may be down to 1 starting offensive lineman. Maybe we have 2. And we do have depth, but the depth is all very young. So it's a matter of going on the road, trying to win with a bunch of young guys who have to continue to grow up in hostile environments. Now, if you get on top of South Carolina and can play from ahead, you win the game. But I don't think that you necessarily want to have to be playing catch up, especially with our offensive struggles. We're not made to catch up on teams.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I'll make a statement really quick, and then I want to ask you a question. Statements about South Carolina's special teams. I mean, obviously Beamer got it from somewhere, right? His dad was successful. His dad and Marv Levy are the 2 best special teams coaches I've ever seen. So you got to be more than 1 score up on them, because they could strike at any moment. But with the offensive linemen, so the offensive linemen, were the injuries known going into the bye week, or did they just learn of these coming into this week? Because that makes a big difference in practice time that backups could have to prepare themselves for the game.
So I say up to. Jimbo Fisher, as a lot of college coaches are, isn't exactly forthcoming when it comes to injuries that aren't season ending. So we know Bryce Foster, our All-American center, is out for the rest of the year, most likely with a torn ACL. And again, that hasn't even been publicly stated, but he's the guy who made the line calls, who started playing in the Arkansas game when we started being able to run the ball all of a sudden magically. He's gone. Starting left tackle may or may not be playing. Starting right tackle has taken a step back this year, and we're probably going to be playing with 2 guards who are not our starters. So it's guys have got to grow up. The other problem we have because of that is that Haynes King is still expected to start, but as we talked about last week, he is suffering from at least turf toe, if not turf toe and broken ribs, which nobody's talking about necessarily from a coaching standpoint. But if you've got an offensive line who can't pass protect and you've got a quarterback with broken ribs, it's pretty certain you're going to see Connor Wigman, the 5-star freshman quarterback, getting his first appearance, because I find it hard to believe Haynes King, no matter how tough he is going to be able to withstand the beating that he took at Alabama. And South Carolina is not as good as Alabama, but our offensive line might be worse.
Yeah. Guys, weekend of football is coming upon us. There were good low-scoring Thursday night games, Friday night games on the way, and a whole slew of them, and some of them that we've talked about on Saturday. Any parting shots, anything we haven't mentioned that you want to make sure you get out there? Any game that we haven't talked about that you want to? I mean, UCLA and Oregon, 2 top 10 teams from the Pac-12. Was the last time we saw that during the day? Thankfully, the game's not happening at 9 o'clock on a Friday night. Anything else you guys want to throw out there?
OU is poor.
I would like to announce that I'm officially paying attention to Major League Baseball this weekend and not college football.
All right, so since the Cardinals are out of the playoffs, I as you guys already know, I'm pulling for the Astros the rest of the way. I got to, so go Astros. I won't say it after you guys are done or win or lose. I won't say it after that, but up until then, I'm in your corner. As much as I know that other Cardinals fans hate to hear me say that, but they can get over it. Anyway, I think it's going to be a really fun rest of the way for the Major League Baseball playoffs for sure, but I also think we're in for a really fun Saturday of football. Best of luck to both of your teams. I don't have a dog in the fight. That is Andy. He yells. That's Jim. He fights. And I'm Scott. I waller in the mud and scream Sooie. You've listened to the October 22nd weekend version of Yell, Fight, Sooie. Thanks for being here, watching us, listening, whatever you're doing. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys, and go Hogs.
Yeah, you go.
Hook 'em horns, baby.
Y'all Fight Sooie is part of the Let's Get To network. Y'all Fight Sooie is produced by Twitchy Dolphin Media.